Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is EarthToLydia. Today we're back to talk about something that I said I didn't really want to talk about again, and that's chapter speculation. But before we get into it, if you guys don't know, I'm a Dead by Daylight streamer on Twitch, and I'm currently in the middle of a partner push, so if any of you would come down and support me over there, then that would really mean a lot to me. I stream at twitch.tv/EarthToLydia, where you can talk directly with me, and maybe we can even play a few games together. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see further updates, I'd love it if you'd consider subscribing. Anyway, let's get into what we're all here for. So it may not have been long since the Silent Hill chapter got released, but we're already getting some hints for what chapter 17 might be. One thing we do know, however, is that this is absolutely a licensed chapter with both a killer and survivor. How do we know this? Well, as with each new chapter, people have been data mining the game files and found both a killer and survivor, meaning this is a full chapter. The other thing that was found was that they can only be purchased with auric cells. So what does that mean? Well, every original character in the game is purchasable via the online store or with auric cells and iridescent shards. However, no licensed character is able to be purchased with iridescent shards. They're only available through actual money. As the chapter 17 characters are not able to be bought with iridescent shards, it means that this must be a licensed character. So realistically, who could this be? Just want to disclaimer this first and say that I don't often like to speculate on what the next chapter is going to be, and I never put all of my eggs in one basket. I might be making a speculation video right now, but I'm going to resist from getting my hopes up or setting my sights on any one idea in particular. I tend to find that if you get all of your hopes up into one franchise, it's very easy to read too much into potential evidence, or you can feel really let down if the killer and survivor aren't who you expected. So as always, please take this with a pinch of salt. I'm also only going to go over movie characters in this video. I am planning on doing a follow-up where we would discuss other medias, so if you want to know about that, then let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for when that comes out. So, a name that was thrown out an awful lot for the last chapter was Candyman, and mostly because Tony Todd, the lead actor in the Candyman series, started following the official Dead by Daylight Twitter account immediately after following the promotional Twitter account for the 2020 reboot movie of Candyman. And having done a quick check on the day of me recording this, he's still following Dead by Daylight. It wouldn't have made an awful lot of sense to see a Candyman chapter for chapter 16, as the original Candyman series had not been revisited in over 2 decades, and the reboot wasn't set to be released for another 3 months. With this in mind, every chapter release in Dead by Daylight is 3 months apart. We saw the Silent Hill series on the 16th of June, so we can assume that the next chapter will be released around the middle of September, and the new Candyman movie is set to be released just a week or so after this. With a brand new reboot to the franchise, it would be mutually beneficial for both the movie and behavior to bring out a trending license to their game, similarly to what they did with Stranger Things. While I'm not a huge fan of the series, and didn't think it was a sensible fit for the last chapter, I truly believe that it would be a wise marketing choice for them to add Candyman in this time. So if I had to place my bets on anyone, I'd say it could well be him this time. Aside from Candyman though, what are the licenses of fair game? We all know that the developers are fans of classic horror and slasher movies. We already have some of the biggest names from the slasher genre in the game, from Michael Myers to Leatherface to Freddy Krueger. So for a lot of people, when asked what the next slasher license could be, not a lot of people have many suggestions to give. Most people's default answer will be to include Jason from Friday the 13th, or at a stretch, they might suggest Chucky from Child's Play. But being a very big fan of horror as a whole, I can't help but feel like a huge list of names are being overlooked. So what other horror franchises are there? Well, if we're looking at genre-defining horror movies, then there are quite a few roads that we could go down. First, there's the name on everyone's lips, Friday the 13th. While I'm sure the developers are desperate to get Jason in their game, as many of us are, the likelihood of this happening anytime soon is unfortunately just not there. As many of you will know, there's an ongoing court case as to who actually lawfully owns the video game rights to Jason and the Friday franchise. Even if the court case is finalized soon, a lot of the Dead by Daylight community tend to overlook some very important factors. First of all, the developers of the game work to releases over a year in advance. What this means is right now, at this moment in time, the teams in charge of negotiating and developing the new chapters will be working on the chapter being released a year from now. This is why on the developer streams we have the 12-month roadmaps, because everything is already planned and in place for the next 12 months. Therefore, if the Jason court battle was resolved and settled overnight, we're still unlikely to see him in the game for another whole year unless the developers decide to completely restructure their next 12 months of development for new releases. The other thing that we need to consider is that whoever the license holder ends up being, they need to agree to the license. It's not as simple as applying for the license and immediately obtaining the rights. This is the same reason why Pennywise or any other Stephen King original character is so unlikely likely to ever come to Dead by Daylight, because Stephen King is notorious for not licensing out his characters. Not unless he has a huge amount of creative control over said character and also the story that goes with them. This is why we see Stephen King making cameos in so many of the movies from his stories. As it currently stands, there is less than a handful of video games officially based off a Stephen King novel. The entity is absolutely not a creation of King's, nor does it have any kind of affiliation with the story of Pennywise or his other characters. To further back this up, game director Matthew Cote has gone on record and said in the past that they have previously applied for the license to Pennywise and been rejected. With no further installments of the It movies to generate hype over, the likelihood of us ever seeing Pennywise in Dead by Daylight seems bleak at best. I've heard a couple of people lately suggesting that they'd like to see a Jaws-themed chapter brought to the game, and while Jaws is undoubtedly iconic, this is one that we can cross off the list with absolute certainty. While the killers brought to the game don't necessarily have to be human, they do need to have humanoid stances. By this I mean they need to have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, as with every other killer we've seen so far. I'd personally like to see an Amity Island map, and maybe some of the protagonists brought to Dead by Daylight as survivors, but this isn't going to be happening for Chapter 17. As we've already stated, we know for certain that Chapter 17 is a full chapter with a killer and survivor. Aside from the shark, Jaws doesn't really have another iconic antagonist that could take his place, and even if he did, people would still want the shark, so I think that rules out this option. While on the topic of non-human killers, a more likely candidate could be the xenomorph from Alien. The Alien franchise is one that still continues to this day, with a new movie released every few years, and as active of a fan base as ever. I personally think the xenomorph will be an incredible addition to Dead by Daylight, and certainly one that wouldn't be out of place. This might be a particularly tricky, not to mention pricey license to obtain, but I'm sure plenty of us would pay a good price to experience this. Another humanoid monster that could be brought into the game is Predator, though with the release of Predator Hunting Grounds coming to the PS4 quite recently, they might want to hold off on this for a little while before considering this option. Still not quite human, but more supernatural, The Exorcist is one of the most notable horror movies of all time, and still to this day is among the highest grossing movies to ever be released. Upon release, many theatres outright banned segments of the film, deeming it too frightening for their audiences, while other cinemas had paramedics called to treat viewers who passed out or suffered from panic attacks. While facing a body possessed by Pazuzu is a concept that I genuinely think would be really exciting, there are real-world ties to ancient Mesopotamian religion, making it quite unlikely that we could see this in the game. In the same vein, The Omen follows a child found to be the Antichrist who violently kills his caretakers and others around him through telekinesis and possession. Though again, the religious ties might be the thing holding this back from coming to the game, as well as the concept of bringing a child to the game as a brutal murderer. While on the topic of possession, I don't think Chucky from Child's Play is completely out of the realm of possibility. When thinking of Chucky, many of you might immediately just think of an angry, lifelike doll, without knowing too much of the backstory. In the opening scene of the original Child's Play, we follow a serial killer, Charles Lee Ray, being pursued by the police. Unable to escape, he winds up in a shop selling children's toys, namely the Good Guy doll. Charles then performs an incantation that transfers his soul to that of one of the Good Guy dolls, giving us the sociopathic Chucky doll. A lot of the Dead by Daylight community has criticized Chucky from ever being in the game, labeling him too short, but when looking at the full backstory, we could come up with various ways in which Chucky could be incorporated into the game. I'd personally like to see a possession type mechanic, but we could also just bring in the likeness of Charles Lee Ray and use the dolls as interactable props around the map, similar to pig boxes or Plague's fountains. Psycho is the most notable horror movie to predate the horror uprising in the 70s, and Alfred Hitchcock's most notable creation of all time. Norman Bates is a character who's lived on in media as recently as 2017 with Bates Motel, and I'm sure would be welcomed by many to Dead by Daylight. While Psycho is considered to be the most notable early slasher, Peeping Tom is considered by many as the original origin of all slasher movies, predating even Psycho by a few months, with a main plot that Ghostface is probably a fanboy of. Peeping Tom focuses on a serial killer which targets women and uses a portable camcorder to record their deaths. There's also I Know What You Did Last Summer, Maniac, Prom Night, Black Christmas, though realistically if the latter were to come into the game then obviously a December release date would be most fitting, and so many more to consider. The amazing thing about horror is the amount of subgenres that have developed over the years, and while I've not quite covered all of them, I feel like there's a whole backlog that Behaviour haven't even touched on yet. While I know that a lot of people don't care an awful lot for licensed characters or maps, I really think there's so much more that could be brought to the table that would be fresh and keep people interested. As I mentioned before, I am planning on making a sequel to this video exploring franchises from different medias such as TV, video games, books, and potentially even real-life killers. If you want to know more about that, then make sure to let me know in the comments below, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel for when that goes live. Also, if you haven't already looked, my social medias, including my Twitch channel and Discord server, are linked below in the description box. Thank you all for making it this far into the video, and I know it was a bit of a longer one, and boy, am I excited for the next one. Until next time, see you later, guys.